All right, go ahead, Trish. Question.
For the interior sand, how many textures are applied to everything? Not like just the brick wall or anything, but all of it?
Depends on what your reference says.
Okay.
If you've got reference for a wall, is there more than one color on that wall?
No.
No. So you can get away with a solid color.
Okay. Oh, so like if the cushion had like a pattern or something?
You need a texture for that. If it's a pattern like the floor here, that's a texture. If it's like the ceiling, that's a texture. The black part of my shirt, no, but since I have a print on it,
Texture.
it's a texture. Yours, solid black, it looks like, so that would be diffuse, yeah. Right. Raphael's, he's got wear and tear on his, so his would definitely be a texture.
You do that in painter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in fact, you would do that to the shirt and painter. All right, so let's start off. We're going to go in and apply, well, let's go over how the presence map works first. All right, so going to use the exterior scene. Here we go, exterior night. What's that? Presence map, yes. So, all right, you know what? Let's go over what it is supposed to do. All right, so presence map, we use a black and white map, which is why we went in and we made an alpha channel for the label. A black and white map, when you plug a black and white map into the presence portion of the material, which is under globals, it will take anything that's black, make it transparent, anything that's white is kept. So this is our little helix sphere scene that we did the materials to on the first day of materials. So applied to the sphere, that simple Maya checker will take any area that is black and make it transparent. It works. You can see through it. It also is genuine because we get shadows that reflect what's missing. So the areas that are kept, those are the white parts. You can use a separate file, or you can use a color map that's the shape of your object, just like we made for the label. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right, so it's really not that hard to apply. You just need to understand that it's got to be set up right to start. Now, by default, the geometry for the label is hidden. Because when you're making materials, it covers the entire bottle. You're not going to be able to see your bottle. So we hid it. So if you go under Windows, Outliner, open up your scene, go to Villa Geo Group, Wine Bottle Group. There's wine bottle inside there. You will see wine bottle, glass, wine label, geo, grayed out. To unhide it, what do? Shift H. Control H hides, Shift H unhides. So now you have geometry wrapped around the bottle. So I'm going to zoom in on that. You have to go under the geometry, you go under the wine bottle. You get it? Good. Anybody else? All right, so unhiding it's one thing. You want to make sure, first off, you're going to be applying the wine label to it. What do you need to do to the geometry? What do you do anytime you're assigning a material to something? Pixar surface, right. Shift T. Because if you don't use Pixar surface, you're going to be under Lambert and you're never going to find presence. Yes?
When she unhid her thing, her geometry like is out way off the bottle.
That means it got moved. So what you want to do is go into the channel box, select the geometry, go to the channel box, and make sure the translate X, Y, Z are 0. If they are not 0, it went for a ride somewhere.
There you go.
Unauthorized access off of the table. By default, it should be there. But for some reason, hers was somewhere else.
Also remember to label the material.
Yes, it feels good to label the material. Yes.
And save now.
Yeah, and save. Good points, all. All right, so wine label. Now, you could also throw whatever you want to hide on a layer and turn the visibility off for that. We could have done that with this, but you guys know display layers. You probably don't know about hiding stuff. You probably haven't done it all that much. So I always like to try and expose you to as much weird workflows as possible, because this is going to happen.
Also, your display layers can sometimes mess up if your IPO is running.
Yeah, there's that too. Just remember, anything, if it can go wrong, it most likely will. Yeah. All right, so first thing we're going to do is bring our label in as a diffuse color, right? Diffuse color. Now, does our label have any gloss on it or shininess? Get reference? Probably not. Most of them are made out of paper. People? They're made out of people. Yeah. It's Soylent Green. No. The wine labels are made out of paper. It's probably, if it is glossy, it's not going to be that noticeable.
What?
What a weird
Scenario.
offer again.
Gold lining like that.
That's a whole different animal. That you would need 2 materials for. One for the base, and then you need to have, on the top, you need to have metal. Or you need to make a map to knock out areas where the metal doesn't exist, and it would just show diffuse, and then you would have the metal on top of it. Don't worry about it. Just
No.
make it gold.
Make it easy.
Chances are you're not going to see it sparkle that much from the camera anyway. You might see a glint of it. That'd be something you'd work on later on. All right, so our file gets plugged into diffuse color. 2D file. We're not doing projections. There's no reason to project this. In file, hopefully you put your label inside the source images. Here is my original label, and here's the one with alpha. Now, when you click on your version with the alpha, you should have the background removed. That's telling you right away that, ooh, that's going to work. Or in theory, it's going to work. You click OK. If I want to see textures, what do I do?
6.
6. There we go. All right, so there's my label, and actually the scale of it's not all that bad. I have extra labels all over. It's like one of those contact sheets that you just overprint everything on. Now, first off, we need to figure out why I have multiple copies. How do I get rid of the multiple copies so I can apply my presence map? First thing, go into the place 2D texture that's driving your file. The thing that it's doing is it's the wrap U and wrap V. Because our label is a certain size, and in order for it to fill up the entire cylinder, it's got to copy itself. So if you turn off wrap U and wrap V, all you're left with is a single label. Now, what I'm going to do at this point is, let me go into my render cam, and actually, you want to make sure that your label is aimed at the camera. Compositionally, it's going to make it a lot nicer. You would not set a table, take a picture of it if you had the label off to the side. I mean, that would just be, I don't know about you, but that would drive me crazy. Because You want to turn it, you want everything to be visible, you want to make a statement. So, let's go in and render this out real quick just to see where we're at. Good. Ooh, what do I have down here? Yes, I got plenty. Good. All right, so quick render just to make sure it works. Then we're going to plug our alpha from the file node into the presence map. And it's magic. It actually works. Now, before I even go any further, what do I need to do to my file node?
Let's go out, so you gotta add the random texture control.
Yep, so I select my file, go to, right now, if I go to the bottom, there is no render man. So I go render man, add texture control, go down, now there's a render man attribute, turn on linearize, sRGB, and re-render. And in theory, it should work. It should look better. Yes, an improvement. All right. Now, in order for me to use the same file that I have for the color, the diffuse color, I need to go into the hypershade. You just can't do it in the attribute editor. So what I need to do is graph the wine label so it shows up in the node editor down here. And this is the part that's actually very simple. I'm going to zoom in so my file node and material are visible. Notice my out color from the file goes into diffuse color. I've also got an out alpha. That's how I access the alpha channel I made. I click on that, that gives me a connection. Where do you think I plug it? Now, this is an alpha channel. It's only expecting something black and white. My presence is all the way at the bottom. All I do is plug it into presence, re-render, and the rest of my label should disappear. It should be a faint memory. All right, so let me go into perspective, zoom in a little bit so we can see that a little better. Of all the different renderers I've used, this is the easiest this has ever had. Yeah, you guys, lighting used to take 4 times longer. Materials used to take twice as long. They used to be called cutout opacity, and you used to have to like do 3 steps as opposed to 1. Now, a couple of things going on here. When you apply a texture into Maya, in the file node, there is a filter that is applied automatically. Called quadratic. That means it slightly softens the texture as it comes in. Just a little bit of a blur to make it look smooth. If you've got something with type on it that you need to read from a distance, if it looks too blurry, you can try turning that filter off. So, in the file node under filter type, just click on it and you can go off. Now, I don't recommend doing that for all the textures because that little softening makes it look nice and smooth. But, like I said, for type, if you've got thin type on there that needs to be read, or it looks too broken up, you can try turning that filter off, rendering it, see what it looks like. Yeah, the default is quadratic. You know how we apply a slight Gaussian blur to the entire image? It's similar to that. In fact, you'll notice that Gaussian is one of the filter types you have a choice of here. Quadratic is a little crisper than Gaussian. Now, is there going to be a difference? So I'm going to let this render with quadratic on, then I'm going to go turn it off, re-render it so we can compare the two. From a distance, one may look better than the other. And usually I only recommend turning the filter off in the file when you have type, because it's got to be read. Usually type is thin. All comes down to my graphic design days, when everything had to be readable. Nowadays, nobody cares. Yeah, frowny face. All right, so let me redo the same thing. Turn that filter off. Hit R again. Just let it crank for a couple minutes. It's totally worth comparing the two. Like I said, you would probably not do this for general textures. Yeah, you have a question? You need to make sure that it fits on the front. So it's just visible in the front, and you need to be able to see the cutout around the label. So, actually, while this is going on, let me see if I can do something else. All right, so if for some reason you've got a different label than I do, and your label size is much larger or wraps around too much around the bottle, or maybe the label itself is too small for whatever reason. One of the things you can do is go into the UV editor and change your UVs. So I'm going to select the geometry, go to my UV editor. Now, notice, I know everybody in model creation just had a heart attack. 0 to 1. Here's the thing. In gaming, yes. Everything's got to be in 0 to 1. In everything else, nobody cares. Nobody cares, I'm sorry. Because unless you're working for a company that everything by their renderer, by their production workflow has to be in 0 to 1, it doesn't matter. But for games, absolutely it does. It has to be in 0 to 1. So if I were taking this into a game, I could be sloppy as I want for film, as long as it doesn't impact anybody else. As long as my render comes out, that's fine. But the minute we got to go into real time with this, then I have to go in and fix it. You had a question?
No, it's like for the computer animation guys, it's less work for us to
Yeah.
remember.
And most of the time, this stuff happens under a tighter deadline than with the game. It's usually you have 4 hours to do this. Or if you're working for an effects company that's working for one of the big guys, you've probably got 3 hours to do it. You know, you get the call at 5 o'clock as you're walking out the door. Oh yeah, we need this by 1 a.m. Okay, sure. Go under UV. Well, if you got to be in modeling, or you have to go under Windows, UV editor. All right. So go in there, and what you can do is select the UVs and scale them. Scale them up, make the UV shell bigger. What happens? Well, what happens though is your image gets smaller because your space got bigger. If you want your image to be bigger, you make your UV space smaller.
Is this actually going to having a square an image helps?
It does. It doesn't have to be a square. Mine was a rectangle, but it wasn't that much of a rectangle. It was like a 4:3 ratio as opposed to just being perfectly square.
Also, another thing that the UV, when you look at the UV, it's really one spaces where the UVs are, but that image repeats itself all throughout the UV.
Right. Except for here, since I've made my space bigger, it just makes the... It's not repeating because I turned off wrap U and V. All right, so here is my filter turned off, and here it is on. On, off. To be honest, it's really hard to tell. Maybe down here in the fine type area, it looks a little clearer. But notice that it did increase my render time. Is it worth 15 seconds for that amount of clarity? No, probably not. Nope. Turn it right back on. So I'm going to go back, turn quadratic back on, save this. Life is good. All right, does that make sense? So you can use this for pretty much anything you want to, even in the interior scene, if you're doing the interior. Suppose you have a label you want to put on your mug. You can do it the same way. Picture frame, you can do exactly that. The thing is, with the picture frame, there's separate geometry for just the mounting part, so you wouldn't have to, but yes, if it were just a piece and you wanted to have that little border around it, you could do this, yes. Now, you can move the picture frame down so that if you decide you want to put an image in there, it's visible to the camera. The thermos, we're going to do projection with that because that's very unique. Because it's metal, there is no diffuse. So how do you put a sticker or color in something that has no diffuse? Projection. But where does it go? Where do we plug that projection into? That's the thing. We actually plug it into what? The face color. The face color, or I'm sorry, edge color, because it's physical metal. It goes into the edge color in the material, in the physical primary specular. The nodes?
Yeah, and have a and it's a part where you take the part where you put the nodes into the
All right, so originally my file was just plugged into diffuse color. So,
and then you also replug the out alpha.
I took out alpha because there's an alpha channel in my file. Took the out alpha and plugged it into the presence of the material down at the bottom.
Sorry.
All you have to do is click on that little green out alpha ball, the output ball, drag a node connector down to presence and plug it into the input. All right. Questions? That makes sense?
I can't find the presence, actually on the material.
And it makes sense, it's just.
All the way at the very
At
bottom.
the very bottom, it says unity pattern.
It says what?
It says unity pattern.
It makes sense, but I just.
Here, I think.
Is that a material?
This is supposed to be a material, yeah.
Is that a Pixar?
Yeah.
Bless you.
I don't know why it's so big.
You've got it set to show everything.
Oh.
You don't want it to show
Here?
everything.
Yeah, or this here.
No, too far.
Here.
No, too much. Yeah. Down at the bottom. Wait, turn that on.
Yeah, it's. Open this up?
Yeah. You know, you can see by clicking that icon there. Go ahead, click again. One more. There you go. That's not a Pixar statement.
It's not.
No. Yeah, but going out of the hyperscape, go back into the hyperscape.
Yeah, it's strange.
Select it.
It's over here.
Okay. Collapse it all the way. Right. Open it up. One click. That shows you all the nodes that are connected. The second click down there ought to just show you exactly what it shows me on the Mac side.
But then, what it does, I show everything.
Well, then you're gonna have to find your presence in that pile of everything.
Is there a search bar for it?
Nope, I wouldn't if I were you.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
One second. Yeah, see, if you click this 0 right here where there's nothing highlighted, that should give you all the commonly used attributes. Like if I click this, it shows exactly what you have. And presence is right in the middle because it's more or less alphabetical.
Right.
But if you click this where it's a little empty stack, it only shows you the commonly used attributes. You don't get that on yours?
No.
All right, then you're going to have to wade through and go in the middle and find it.
Yeah.
Yes?
When I go to activities in the internet, I can't find the control.
What control?
To fix the,
What do you want to fix?
I was fixing the attributes in the
You mean for the file node? You have to be in the file node. So diffuse color, click on the input button. And then you go to attributes. Remember, it's under file. All right, any other questions? All right, so let's talk a little bit about projections and layering, especially in Maya. All right, so we talked about texture mapping last time. UVs, 2D projection, your flat surface. So with projection mapping, when we choose to do a projection, we actually get 4 nodes rather than 2. Now, the only way you can make the difference between just normal texture mapping and projection mapping is when you go into the Create Render node, you have to right-click on File. You just don't left-click. If you left-click, you'll just create a normal file. You have to right-click, you'll get a contextual menu, and you'll choose create as projection, which is totally unreadable up there on the screen. But if you're using Go to Training, hopefully it's at least a little clearer.
Mine's lagging.
Yeah, it's super laggy, there's nothing there.
Well, that's because this is the best room ever for internet.
Yeah,
Yes.
someone's downloading torrents.
Yes.
Torrents.
All right. So the only way you can create a projection is by right-clicking on File before you make it. If you forget to do that and try and create it after the fact, not going to work. It's way more trouble than it is if you just go back and do it again. Now, so what happens? We still get a file node and we still get a place 2D. You still need to have control over how often that texture repeats, how it repeats, whether the frame is rotated or not, all the stuff that you would normally use. But the difference is that we get 2 extra nodes. One, we get a projection node, and the other is we get a 3D placement that drives the projection node. 3D placement is similar to the 2D, except that instead of U and V space, we're moving in X, Y, Z. Moving, rotating, and scaling. So that means that you can take something, a sticker usually is what we use it for, when you want to have something and put it on the wall. So for example, I put up my little sticker here that says prop weapons in use. So I put that on as a projection because I want it there. My boss says to me, no, we want it right under the clock. It's got to be centered. Yeah, I know it looks natural there, but we don't want it there. So you go in, you grab your projection, you move it over, you're done. You didn't have to go into Photoshop and move your UVs based on anything. You just pick it up and move it. Now they say, all right, well, they don't like it there. They want to be able to see it as soon as they walk in the room. Well, this wall and this wall are the same color. They're made of the same material. So you go, okay, no problem. Move my projection over here. There it is. Done. That makes sense. That's why we use it. Again, similar to stickers or labels or what's that? Yeah, like a refrigerator magnet would be similar usage. But labels, stickers, and games, the same kind of principle. All right, so to demonstrate this, I'm just going to pull up a simple file in Maya. Don't even need to render this because projections will show up. They'll show up in the viewport. So I'm going to create a brand new scene. Going to create a ground plane. Just because you need something to set everything on. I'm going to create 2 shapes. I'm going to do a cube. And I'm going to do a cylinder. You'll see why I want to do a cylinder in a minute. Oh, good. And the file. And our internet starts now. All right, so got a cube, create a cylinder. All right, so I'm going to assign a Pixar surface to my ground. Right there. Just going to call it ground. And I'm going to assign the same Pixar surface to both my cylinder and my cube. Now, let's just go with projections first. And then I'm going to show you how you use layers with this, because most of the time when you're doing a projection or you're doing a decal, you've got a base behind it and you want to have something on top. So for the example of my wall, I've got a color there already, and if I put my sticker on top of it, I need to have something to layer it onto. But for now, I'm just going to go with just showing you the projection first, then we'll get into layering. All right. Now, what I'm going to use for this is, let's use the AAA logo I gave you guys. So that should be in the downloads portion of Project 6. There it is, Thermos logo. So you download that, that will give you this. Simple black and white logo. Make sure it's in your source images, which mine is already. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to plug my projection into the diffuse color. Now, I'm going to do it just like I would normally do to create a normal file node. I'm going to click on the checker button next to diffuse color. 2D textures, but instead of me left clicking on file, I right click, I get my contextual menu, and I choose create as projection. Now when I do that, I'm going to go into the hypershade and show you what was created. So here is my Pixar surface. I'm going to right click and graph network. So, plugged into my diffuse color, there's a projection node. The projection node is now keeping track of my file and the placement portion of my file. Think of your file node and the place 2D as the passengers in your car. They get in, they move around in 2D space, right? Now, we've got a magical car that moves in 3 dimensions. So it moves in X, Y, and also in Z. Or Y up, depending on whatever your coordinate system is. All right, so my file node, my place 2D is plugged into the file is plugged into the projection. The projection is navigated with this. Think of this as your steering system. This allows you to move forwards, backwards, side to side, up and down. This is our magical vehicle, and it is just a shell. It has nothing until it has passengers, and it has a steering system. Does that make sense? All right, so we have it. Now we need to put our passengers in. We need to actually have passengers. So in the file node, this is where we're going to load in our file. Going to load in my AAA logo. There we go. So I'm going to hit 6 on the keyboard. There we go. So some of them show up, some of them don't. What the heck is going on?
Anarchy.
Exactly. Chaos. It's Maya. Yeah. So it's anarchy. Yeah. All right. So what happens is you get this little thing here that's created that looks a little bit like a rectangle light. This is actually how you project the logo. Now notice it's just projecting infinitely from the direction that my little pointer is aimed at, right here. That little pointer. Now, you know it's not a rectangle light because in the corner it's got a little diamond. That tells you this is a projection. Right now, by default, I get many, many logos. Same reason I got too many for the wine label. Because wrap U and wrap V is turned on. So what I want to do is go into my place 2D over here, and I want to turn off wrap U and wrap V. So now I only have one lead. Now notice it's still projecting, and it's projecting through. So from this side, looks great, no problem, right? But as soon as the camera moves around, you look on the other side, you go, wait a minute. Yep, it's reversed. So, couple ways I can take care of that. Well, first off, let's move it around. I don't like it here, I want to put it on the side here. So I can move it around, and if I move it so that the projector doesn't point on any of the objects, I don't get anything. It's not wrapping anymore. Now, if I want to aim it here, I have to rotate it. Does that make sense? Now, the reason that these two had the logos going through them is because they were both overlapping each other. So if I move this over here, see, they're overlapping. It's now in the path of the projection. Now, in the case of the AAA logo on the thermos, my thermos is what shape? Cylindrical, which is why I chose this. So, when you've got an object that is cylindrical, this doesn't do too bad of a job, but it is warping a little bit because it's flat and it's being stretched until it hits the side. So, what we can do is we can change the type of projection. By default, you get a planar projection, a flat planar projection. So, if I go into my hypershade, click on projection, now I have projection type. I've got spherical, cylindrical, ball, cubic, triplanar, concentric, perspective. Perspective means I can project it from my camera, which is pretty cool. But probably next to planar, one of the most common projection types is going to be cylindrical. And what it does is changes the shape of my projection, and now it will not project unless it touches it. It's got to actually touch the surface. Now, if I want to make this so that I can scale it, all I have to do is go into my place 3D, and by default, whenever I'm moving this projection around, I get the place 3D, because the place 3D is really XYZ controlling my projection. What I can do is hit interactive placement, and now I can scale it. Yep. Now you'll notice as I'm playing around with it here, it's playing around with the scale. If I want to get out of interactive placement, I can click over here on the diamond. I can get into translation, rotate, scale. I can activate any one of those. I can hit W to get out of interactive placement. That'll just take me right into translate again. Now notice, like I said, it does not go all the way through the object when you change the type of projection. Now, if I want to bring this back to the box here, Yeah, it's gonna work, but it's gonna be really weird. Because it's still facing the same direction. So, I can go back and I can rechange this into planar again. But notice it's still going to go through. So, if you've got a planar projection you don't want to show through on the other side, there's a way we can fix that. We go under the projection node itself. We go all the way down in the attributes to effects, and there's a little switch here called wrap. Click on that, and now my projection turns into a box. And it will only project when the box touches the geometry. Oh, stop. I mean, technically it's not too bad. I still would rather use cylindrical projection because it's going to give me a little more accurate look. But you can stop the projection from going through objects. Now, if you want to turn that off, that's fine. You can just click on it again. There we go. Takes a while for the interface sometimes to kick back in. Now notice when I turned wrap off, everywhere that was not part of my projection was dark gray. That's the default Pixar surface. When I had it turned on for wrap, or turned off, everything got really light. You see the difference? Now, where is that coming from? First off, where is my color coming from? When I have wrap turned on. Why is it dark? Alright, let's go to diffuse. Here's my material. I have the projection plugged in there. Here's what happens. When you turn off wrap U and V, I've got a little tiny piece of my logo that now is not filling up the entire UV space on this shape. So what happens is there is what's called a default color in there to make up wherever the logo does not fit, does not cover up the space. Because if we did not have anything to define the material's color, we would have green and you would have an error failure. Remember, when a material, you're modeling, material loses its material properties, it turns green, it turns invisible. So this happens right here under File. You'll notice that under File, under Color Balance is Default Color. Default color is 50% gray. You go down here, it's a lot easier to see. Right here, 50% gray. So if I change that, changes the background. So if I want to have it blend in with the background of my logo, which is white, I can turn it up. Does that make sense? Okay, so here comes the question. What happens if I have a red cylinder and a red box and I throw my projection onto it? It's going to change the color. So, but how do I get my color and have my projection? Okay. But if I plug my projection in, isn't that going to... I can only have one thing plugged in at one time. So if I plug a file in, it's going to disrupt my color. Okay, that's a good question. Could I plug it in somewhere else? Yep, you're on the right track. We're actually going to layer it. This is where layered textures come in. Now, before I go any further with that, let's go over what layered textures are, because it should help a little bit better. So, we know about layering in Photoshop, right? One layer sits on top of another, covers it up unless you have a special blend mode which allows stuff to show through. Remember we did our high pass filter. It was kind of grayish and we made it sharpen so it had more contrast between highs and lows. We used a blend mode called overlay, which allowed all the midtones from underneath that layer to show through. That's a special blend mode. Now, Maya has blend modes. It also has layers, except just like everything else in Maya, it's like Photoshop except it fell sideways. Maya's layering system is horizontal. The top layer is all the way on the left. The bottom layer is all the way on the right. Now, in Photoshop, if you don't like a layer's location, you can move it, left mouse click and drag, right? In Maya, can't do that. In Maya, you have to middle mouse drag and click. So, you need a mouse. Absolutely can't do it with the trackpad, unless you go buy that little utility, which is virtual middle mouse, or there's some utility you can get for your trackpad that screws it up. All right, now, in Photoshop, if you want to make a new layer, what do?
New layer.
Yeah, you click the new layer icon. In Maya, what do? You click anywhere that's blank here and it will create a layer.
Okay.
Now, in Maya, unlike Photoshop, you get a disgusting lime green color for each blank layer. That is purely there to remind you that, hey, if you don't do anything, this is what you're going to get displayed. So it's kind of a good wake-up call. You know, you forget, all of a sudden you're seeing this lime green. Oh, yeah. I left the layer undone. If you want to remove a layer in Photoshop, what do?
You drag it to the trash or drag it to the trash.
Drag it to the trash. You can select it and hit delete on your keyboard. You can't do any of that in Maya. You have to click on the little X underneath the layer. Now, what happens if you miss?
Create a new layer.
Yeah. And then you get more agitated, so you keep clicking and you create more layers.
Your Maya crashes.
Yes, and here's the question. How many layers can you have in Maya?
As many two.
As many until it stops.
Yep. As many until Maya crashes.
Which is probably just gonna be 2.
Well, no, I've had 30 layers at one point.
I believe in my computer.
Yeah.
I don't.
All right. To work on a layer, you must select it, and then the attributes for the layer are enabled. You have color, which means you can plug a file into it, or you can make it a solid color chip. Either one. Alpha is equivalent to Photoshop's opacity. Blend mode, same as Photoshop's blend modes, only Maya's got like a handful compared to Photoshop. Layer is visible, same as the eye icon in Photoshop. But these are all dependent on which layer you have selected, so don't forget that. If you want to change a layer's order, you have to middle mouse click and drag. Remember, every time you create a new layer, it's always going to be at the bottom, and you have to drag it to the order you want it in. All right, does that make sense so far? Yes?
When you click on them, are they gonna have their names, or you just gonna name them as you go, pretty much, like always?
Well, by default, all right, here's the way layer textures work. Layer textures have no placement information at all. They are just containers. So you're going to put a file node in there, you're going to put whatever you're going to externally drop into Maya in there. Whether it's a solid color chip, or it's a file, it's 2 files, it's 10 files, it doesn't matter. You're going to be putting them in, layering them up. The layer texture itself is the only thing you have to worry about naming. Because if not, you're just going to get layer texture 1, 2, 3, 4. You might want to go diffuse layer texture, or speck layer texture, or whatever you're layering. As far as the individual names of the layer, that's dependent on what you plug in and what you named it. So if you plug file 1 in, that's going to be file 1. If you rename file 1 to be diffuse color, it's going to be diffuse color. So whatever you have it named at is what that layer is going to be. Does that make sense? All right, now, Maya's layer texture exists in one place only. In the Create Render node, or in the Hypershade, under Create, you go to File, Other Texture, I'm sorry, not File. You go Other Textures, and Layer Texture is the only thing in there. It's a hermit, it lives by itself. Makes sense so far? Okay. Now, here's the next part. We need to be able to order the layers the way we want them. And there's also going to come a time when we want to remove parts of a layer and allow bottom parts to show through. So this is where layering would come in very handy here. So what I'm going to do is go in and make a layer texture. Now my layer texture is not attached to anything. What I want to do though is I want to have my projection put into my layer texture, and I want to be able to have another layer for the color of my cylinder and my cube. You guys with me so far? I need a background color.
Yes.
And I need to be able to have my projection separate so I can manipulate them as I need it. So, by default, I'm going to get that single empty layer in there that's going to be green. So here, if I want to, this will be my background. What did I say? Red. So now I've got red. Now, what I need to do, though, is if I take my layer texture and go out color and plug it into diffuse color, it's going to disconnect my projection because you can only have one thing plugged in at a time. So here's what I want to do. I want to take my layer texture and put it in between the projection and the diffuse, and between the projection and my material. So what I'm going to do here is, since there are many inputs, I'm just going to middle mouse drag my projection, and notice when I click on my projection, hold middle mouse down, it gives me a green circle with a plus. I'm going to take it and drag it down into my layer texture. Now I've just added my projection into my layer texture. Now I just need to take the out color of my layer texture, which is the sum total of everything that's plugged in there, and where do I want to put it?
Is it still in diffuse?
Diffuse color.
Is it still brown?
Because I want to route everything through the layer texture. But now here's the thing. In my layer texture, I don't see it because my color swatch is on top of it. So where does my color swatch need to go? Yeah, it needs to go behind it on the bottom. So I middle mouse click, drag. All right, all fine and well, but I'm back to where I was. Crap. So how do I get my logo to be visible on top of my red background? And this is where layering comes in. Got the right layering order, but now I need a blend mode. And here's what I need to do. I need to remove the white around my logo so it lets the red show through. Make sense? So, this is where this comes in. This is the extent of math that we do in shading and lighting. We add, we multiply, and we breathe. That's it. Okay, if you can do them, you're golden. Yes,
Do these add and multiply do the exact same thing that we do in Photoshop?
exactly.
Yeah.
These are the common blend modes you also use in Nuke and Shake and After Effects and any other compositing package.
And then you go for multiply. Because if anybody has to use Photoshop for painting, you know that multiply and putting white on it doesn't do anything.
Okay, but here, why?
Because white is 1, and you multiply anything by 1 and it gives you the same thing.
Good.
As opposed to
Yes.
any other color that is darker, that it's.
Okay, good. Well, that's exactly what this exercise is. Good. All right, so, as David said, let's define, first off, black is equal to what number in Maya? 0. Good. Okay. White?
1.
1. Good. So, down under these scenarios, I'm just going to plug in 0 and 1. Because we're going to find out which one we want to use for when and why. Now, the second number in my little equation here is my random color. Could be any color. It's a number, it's going to represent a file, it's going to represent a color. Somebody give me a number.
12.
How about 17 since it's 5 and 12? There we go, 17. So, 17 is my color. Make sense so far?
Yeah.
So now we take 17 and populate it into here. Now, 0 plus 17 is what?
17.
17.
Yep. 1 plus 17, which is white? 18. Remember, color is additive. Just like lighting in CG, in digital terms, color is additive. Now, multiplying 0 times 17, we get what? 0. So, if we multiply black to a number, we get black. 1, which is white, times 17, 17. So, if we have a white background, as you said, we would use multiply. If our background behind our logo was black, add. Does that make sense?
What I don't get is what determines the number.
Which number?
In this case, it's 17.
17 is the number you gave me. That represents any color, any file that you're using. So 17 right now represents my logo. So I have what color behind my logo? White. So my logo, I want to get rid of the white background. Do I use add or multiply? Multiply, right. Now, if my logo's white and I got a black background and I want to remove black, add. There you go. Just remember that number is just the stand-in for anything. That's equivalent to X in every math formula. X is some number, it's whatever you have or need. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it could be purple, it could be green, it could be a checker pattern, it could be a wood pattern, it could be skin. It doesn't matter.
If you have your doubts, you can always just grab your logo, put it on Photoshop, put in your random color behind it, and then just go add or multiply it.
Well, in Maya, could even do one quick. It's simpler. If you do one and it doesn't work, try the other. I mean, you got a 50-50 shot. So that's kind of how I look at it. I'm not going into Photoshop. That means I got to quit out of Maya. I got to start at Photoshop. I got to load it in. No, I'm just going to go. I missed the first time. I'm going to get it the second time. So this all applies back here, because now what I want is I want to get rid of the white and allow the red to show through. So I select my top layer, which contains my projection. I go into my blend modes. Right now, by default, it's set for over. That means it's sitting on top of my other layer, hiding it. I want to go down and multiply. Now, notice I get this really nice, vibrant color here. And I get this kind of dingy, dark color. That comes from the default color that is in the file node. Wherever the logo doesn't have white, it has the default color. So, if I go under File, my default color is gray. I need it to match my background. So I change my default color to match the background, which is white. Now everything matches. Because now it can multiply out everything except for the logo. Does that make sense? Questions? Yes? No? So I can rotate this if I want. I can do this to it. Why you would want to do that, I don't know. That's pretty cool though. Kind of reminds me of Stitch. Okay, enough fun. Questions about that part? Does that make sense? Now, suppose I didn't want a solid color. Well, what I could do is go into my layer texture, which is right here. I can click on that. I can map in another file. So for example, now, I don't necessarily want it in as a projection here, because I usually don't want to have a projection for a background. Only for something that's small and movable that I may need to change. So suppose I go in and I make all of those my wall color. Same thing. Same thing. All I've done is put a file node in my second layer. And I still have my projection. I can still move that around. Yep. In fact, you'd probably want to put graffiti on this way, because then you can move it around, position it if you want to. And you could have several layers of graffiti. So I could throw in, on top of this, let's say I want to graffiti this up. So I go in here. I need to first off make a new layer, right? This new layer needs to go where in the layering order? Yeah, above the brick. We're probably going to stick it above the projection I have there already. So I'm just going to middle mouse drag it to the top of the order. Right now, this is nothing. So I need to plug something in here. So I'm going to click on color swatch. If this is graffiti and I want to be able to move this around, I need to put it in as a projection. So 2D, right click on file, create another projection. There we go. So pretty complicated layering system right now. I mean, we went from 0, having nothing in there, to plugging one projection in, then putting a layer texture in, then putting two layers with files in there. Now we've got 3. So here's my new projection right here. Down here under File, let's map in, do I have my SAL logo? Yes, I do, right there. SAL logo. Yep. So first thing I want to do is I probably don't want it repeating over and over again, Because if I were doing graffiti, I would never make the same shapes twice. Generally, with a spray can, your chances of doing that are astronomical.
Unless you're a really good artist.
Yeah, unless you do nothing but work with spray pan.
Or you're using templates.
True. True. But if you're doing guerrilla graffiti, you don't have time for a template. You're just psh, and you're out. Wait, I just told you how to put graffiti on. No, I didn't say that. I'm going to erase that out of the thing. You already, yeah, you guys already knew.
Forgot I was recording.
Yeah. All right, so first thing I want to do, select my brand new layering system here. All right, I need to go into Place 2D, turn off Wrap U and Wrap V, just like I did. All right, so which one is this? That's the other one. Now, if you ever have too many projections in there, just go in and projection 2, select the Place 3D. There you go. All right, now, I sort of have it positioned where I think I want it. I won't know until I actually get everything in there. First thing I need to do, once I've got it visible in my scene, is fix the blend mode. What do I need to make it? Yep, I want to get rid of that white background. Multiply. Now it's got that dingy gray behind it. How do I fix that? Default color in the file node. So I go down to my new file node, default color. What color do I want it to be? White. There we go. Now I can just go in and move it around where I want it. Too small. Make it bigger. Let's get really sloppy. I did some overspray there. So you can just keep adding and adding and adding layers as you need them. So the base layer back there, you don't need a projection for that. That's always going to be put in just as UV texture mapping, normal texture mapping. Anything that you want on top of it that might be movable, a sticker, a decal, a label, projection, because then you can move it around. Now, here's the thing. Most people ask, well, why didn't we use projections for the wine label? That's because presence and alpha channels and projections in Maya don't mix. Maya's projections don't understand alpha channels.
Also because the wine has different color time. If I were to put that on multiply, it would just mess around with the colors.
Correct.
And these are just black and white, so.
Right.
something like that.
Now, this would work with color also. A color decal, a color sticker.
What?
Yes, it would.
So like you set it to multiply it?
Well, here's the thing. Suppose your boss comes in and says, well, besides that, it took you less time than I thought, you're fired. Now, suppose he says, all right, they want to get rid of the white background, but part of their logo is inside the ellipse, it's white. So here, you need to go into Photoshop and make an alpha channel. You would put it into as a layer texture, but we would put it in as an over and plug the alpha channel into the alpha part of the layer texture. That way you can keep any color, any white background, and remove the outside part of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So basically it would be this. Do I have time to do that? Ah, sure. Yeah, why not? All right, so AAA logo. I'm going to open this up in Photoshop and Maya. Here we go.
Here we go.
Mistake.
All right, here it is. Save as PSD because I'm going to be doing awful things to this. Good, there we go. Okay. Now, if I want to make this as an alpha channel, first off, this is grayscale. I want to go RGB on this so I can have RGB alpha. So, even though it's going to be black and white, I still want to have an RGB file.
Did you click on layer to get to the?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I want to do is I want to select the inside here of the ellipse, and I want to have that as my, that's going to be my opaque part of my logo. Everything else is going to be removed. So I could do a couple things. I could do a simple ellipse, try and figure out, oh, how can I do that? No, that's not going to happen. I can go in and use my magic wand. And you can just hold shift down. In fact, I kind of like this solution because I've selected those areas. And what I want to do is go under channels and create an alpha channel based on that. Now, here's the thing. Did that give me what I want? It's backwards, yes. So let's Z back. Let's invert my selection. So now, yep. Wait, this is wrong.
You gotta select both the inside space. So I will reverse your selection there, press shift with your wand tool and click on the left. So that way you can have the white inside selected and the black of the logo selected.
All right, so let's go back. Let's invert this again. So the background here is removed. The lettering part is removed, which is fine because the lettering is, it's going to be on this layer anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And this is going to be white. This is what I want. Because I want everything that I don't want to be black, everything I want to keep to be white. Remember, black transparent, white opaque. So it actually did work the first time.
Oh,
It's all right. We're here to learn. So I can, since it's a PSD, I can save my selection if I ever want to go back to it. Really wasn't that hard to do, so I'm not too worried about it. Save my PSD, go File, Save As, Targa. Make sure my alpha channel's there. I'm going to add the word alpha at the end. 32-bit. Got to be 32-bit. Click OK. Life is good so far. Now I'm going to quit out of Photoshop because I have tempted the memory gods. So, let's go in and make, well, why not? What the hell, another layer. They're free. Put it at the top. I did. All right, so file node, right click. Create as projection again. This time I'm going to bring in my alpha. Wait, do I want a projection? No, I don't. Get out of there.
Oh, you took it out way
Oh,
easier than
no.
Frank did. Frank
Oh
messed
no.
up.
That was Jeffrey's dog. There we go. All right. So when you do that, you delete it. So I make a new layer, drop it in front here. And now what I can do is, actually wait, you know what I'm going to do? Let's put this on the floor. Put my AAA logo on the floor. No. Let's have fun. We'll just do this. All right. All right, on the floor, no. Back in our layer texture. So now I'm going to just choose File. Here is my alpha. Got rid of everything that I don't want around it. Wait, where's my black? Oh no, it didn't save it. Oh, it did. Now, well, remember it's going to stretch across. Since I didn't put it on as a projection, it's going to stretch across all the objects in there.
Well, I just thought because like the letters were black too and it didn't show up on your alpha, that it would have just gone for white.
All right, so what I need to do here is I want to get rid of the background. So for this, I need to go to Over. And what I need to do here in Over is take my out alpha from my file right here, and I'm going to expand my inputs. So this one is going into input 3, it looks like. Expand input 3, there's my alpha. So I can take out alpha, plug it in here. And there you go. Now, it did take out the black. So, all is not lost because I saved it as a PSD. So I can go back in, redo my selection, and fix my alpha. So last time I just selected all of this. What I want to do is select the outer part. And I am going to, if I make an alpha out of this, let me delete this alpha channel. There we go. So if I make an alpha out of that, that's the reverse of what I want. It's going to keep the white background, get rid of the logo. So let's delete that one again. I need to do what to my selection? Yep, invert it. And this is probably what you guys were thinking the first time. So now, when I click on my alpha, that's what I want. I want everything that is attached to the logo to be cut out. Because I want the black to show up, I want the inside of my logo to be white, and I want the outside to disappear. So I'm going to save this, save as, make sure it is a Targa. Going to put alpha in there again. Make sure it's 32-bit. Going to replace it 32. Click OK. Quit Photoshop. Going to go back into Maya, and all I'm going to do is bring back my file. Just going to reload it. Which, where are you? Here. So here, here. I could hit reload, but notice reload does not show up in the property editor, which is why I hate the property editor. So I could hit reload here, and there you go. Now, granted, with this method, you can't use projections. because projections and alphas don't work very well. That's just one of those Maya things. For this, I would have to go in and resize it manually and try and position it where I want it. Coverage, I could knock it down a little. Let's see. Quite frankly, if you're going to do something that's not a projection and resize it, you're probably going to have to export your UVs, go into Photoshop and position it, because you can't move this around. That's the downside of doing a layered texture with an alpha channel, using the over blend mode. No. Yep. Basically, don't do that. Nope. Nope. Not unless you like pain. Alright, there we go. Alright. Any questions? Does that make sense? As far as layering goes? Blend modes. Remember, it's either going to be add or it's going to be multiply. So, one thing I did want to show you before we leave is how to apply the projection to the thermos if you're doing the interior. Alright, so interior day, here we go. Oh, doesn't look like I saved it. Oh well. I'll just do it again. Did I? No, I probably did. I thought I threw the floor texture in on this one. Oh well. Yeah, I quit out. So, I want this. Nah, never mind, forget that. Okay, so that's what I want, stainless steel. So new Pixar surface. Physical. Edge color. Roughness, it's brushed metal, anisotropy, So brush metal-y, sort of. Ooh, I know what I want to do. Hide you. You're expensive. Alright, good enough. I can see that. Alright. I have no diffuse on this material, but I need to put a projection on it. So, no diffuse color. My projection goes into edge color because everything visible in metal is reflectivity. So edge color, 2D, right click, create as projection. All right, in the file node, that's where I'm going to map in my AAA logo. The standard old JPEG one is the one you want to use because I don't want an alpha for this. So, got it assigned. Everything's good. Trouble is, just like everything else that you create in Maya by default, it drops my projection into the center of the world. So where is that? All the way over here. How do we create a projection? Yeah, but what do we do once you bring up the create render node? You have to right click on file and choose create as projection.
And that is going to add color. Like, when you do color.
Do we have anything in the diffuse? This is metal.
No.
No.
Does it mean yet color?
The edge color. Yes. Edge color. And you right click on file and create as projection. The projection by default is going to drop in at the center of the world. Right here. Stop doing that. Now, I need to get this all the way over here. Normally, you can translate it over, right? Okay. In theory, and I say this again, in theory, I can click on this thing called Fit to Group B box. You guys know what a B box is? It's not a beat box. It's a bounding box. They teach you about bounding boxes and modeling. No. Okay. A bounding box is 8 points that can define any shape. So, my cylindrical shape here, 4 points at the top, 4 points at the bottom. The volume inside of it is my bounding box. Or the volume outside of it is my bounding box. This chair can be defined, the space that this takes up can be defined in 8 points. 4 points at the top, 4 points at the bottom. This is also how we figure out collisions in gaming. Right? Bounding boxes. You don't want them going through other bounding boxes. Now, games are a little more sophisticated because they will take the shape rather than just a box. But old school, real old school games, that was the original collision, was box. So, it can define any shape. So, clicking Fit to Group Bounding Box should take my projection and force fit it to the geometry I have that assigned to. I say should because 85% of the time, this doesn't work in demos. The other 15% of the time, like last month, it worked. I have no idea why. So if I click this button, it worked. It jumped over there and resized itself. Good dog. Yeah, really. All right. Now, here's what happens if it doesn't work. You click fit to group bounding box, and all it does is get really big and stay in the same spot like a stubborn dog. So in that case, you have to just undo it and just physically move it and put it into position here. But it worked for me, so what I'm going to do now is start rendering so I can adjust my logo. Now, by default, I'm going to get multiple logos. First thing I have to do is turn off all those repeating logos, which is how? Wrap U and V, where do I find that at? No, you didn't forget. Yes, it is. Place 2D. All right. So there we go. Well, yeah, it's going to stretch. So one thing I can do is start scaling it down. And of course, you'll notice that IPR just works wonderfully. So stop it, don't believe it, but what I'm going to do is graph my network for the thermos, go to my place 2D, turn off wrap U, wrap V. There we go. Now, so it's showing up. I just have to scale it. I also want to change it from a planar projection to a cylindrical. You guys understand that from the demo before, right? What I want to show you is, don't forget, you want to get rid of the dingy gray around the logo. Our edge color was pure white before we put the logo on it, right? The logo has pure white behind it. But everywhere the logo does not take up, we have the default color, which is what? Gray. So we need to make the default color the same as the logo, which is what? Wait. So how do I change that? Where do I go? Yep, the file node. All right. Stop IPR. File node, file node. File node, there we go. So file node, default color needs to be white. Now when I re-render, theoretically it should make all that gray go away on the outside. There you go. So now you just need to position the logo so it's visible to the camera. So this is all reflectivity. We're knocking out areas we don't want to be reflected. Does that make sense? Questions?
So that's the same process for last object or the last section?
It would go into, that might take two maps because you have the refraction gain and the reflection gain. Because you don't want that to be transparent. I'm trying to think, if you did it in color, if you just took, say we took this AAA logo, put it in there. If you had clear glass, the white would be fine because that would be clear. Wherever it wasn't clear, it would be black, which means it would be pulling in from the diffuse. It would show up because we have no diffuse color. The trouble is, if you want the logo to be blue and your glass to be clear, or you want it to be red and the glass is clear, then you need to have red in the diffuse, so when you knock out the area that's transparent, which is clear glass, the white, it needs to show through as red. It would take a few more maps to do. It could be done, but it takes a few more maps. I'm just trying to think of an easy way to do it for you guys, because there are different ways you can do it. You could do it with a layered texture. You could try and do it just in the color channel, but that's going to be dependent. If you've got a full color, like one of those, like portrait prints that they stick on glass, that's going to be a different process, like full color. But, yeah, it should work. Do you have a specific example? We have the cylinder for that. What I was thinking is some people like to make the mug clear and then put like a stenciled logo on it. Or you could do the vase too. Yes? Yep. So for this, let me stop IPR. All right, now, right now I've got a planar projection. I want to change that to cylindrical. So I go into Hypershade. I have to select the actual projection. Right here, I go down under planar and I choose cylindrical. So now it wraps itself around the bottle correctly. And since I hit fit the group bounding box, it should still conform to the shape of the scale of it. So in theory, I should be able to render it out. It shouldn't look all that different. It should be a little less distorted. What do you mean? Vector images? It depends on the input. Like Maya has its own vector renderer. So you need to make stuff in Maya using that renderer in order to get it out. You would have to convert them to images if you're going to plug it into RenderMan in the file node. There is no real vector input where you would scale it and then, it maintains its integrity. Because we're outputting to fixed pixels, it doesn't really make sense to do that. Most of the vector stuff is mostly for interactive. Like on the web, the SVG format that lets you make stuff bigger or smaller, and it keeps its clarity. That's where vectors are really. Yeah, but see, the problem is that is a rasterized image, and if you were to turn that into vectors, you would have to go into Illustrator and redraw the whole thing. Now, Illustrator had, or used to have, it would convert to paths for you, but it would go in and read edges, and it took forever, and you always had to clean it up. All right, so I would just come in and just rescale this so it's not quite so stretched on the edges, maybe a little. Nope. Stop doing that. So just try and undistort it a little. Good questions. Any others? All right, so like I said, you need at least one projection in your scene. If you want to do the exterior scene, then I suggest you either take the SAL logo, put it on the table in the lower right corner, or you can make your own initials or some appropriate graffiti, and you could put it on the table too as a projection. We're also, after Tony does his lecture on Substance Painter, on Thursday I'm going to wrap it up and show you guys how to add some. He's going to show you wear and tear in Substance. I'm going to show you wear and tear in Maya. So we're going to be putting like wine stain rings on the tablecloth. You can use that as your projection also. Put a couple of those on there. If you're doing the interior, coffee rings, he's going to show you coffee rings too, but they're going to be fixed in your texture. The coffee rings we're going to do are going to be projections. You can move them around. So that's really the only difference. Substance, you're painting them into position because it's a 3D paint program. In Maya, we're using Photoshop stuff and putting it in 3D so we can move it around on the fly in Maya and then render it out. Most of the time, if you're doing it in Substance, you already know where you want it to go. Trouble is, if you put it in there, you throw it back into Maya, render it out, and your boss comes in and goes, oh no, they want to move that over here. Then you got to go back into Substance, move your stuff around, export it out, come back. Upside, downside, it's the same thing. You can never make anybody happy, so.
No, you can't, you can't please anybody. So why try?
For the grade. For the grade.
Yeah, just give up. Sorry.
Okay, any questions? All right.